Have you ever learned a new word and then like suddenly started seeing it everywhere?
Oh yeah, all the time. It is the weirdest feeling.
Right. I mean, you go your entire life never having heard this word, and then suddenly it's in a book you're reading.
Or it's, printed on some massive billboard you drive past.
Exactly. Or you just overhear it in a totally random conversation at the grocery store. It feels like a glitch in the Matrix or something.
It really does.
So we're doing a deep dive into this today, and I have to share the story I found from a Reddit user because it perfectly captures that feeling.
Okay, let's hear it.
So this person had a highly specific dream about like an odd small island with an abbey on it,
Uh-huh.
and it was one that you could only reach during low tide.
Wow, that is incredibly specific. Not exactly the kind of thing you just stumble across every day.
Not at all. But so the very next day, they're scrolling online and they see a video of a real place called Mont Saint-Michel in France.
Oh, right, yeah.
And it looks exactly like the dream. So, they read up on it.
Yeah,
Crazy coincidence, right?
very crazy.
But then, that exact same morning, they get a text from their parents. And their parents are on this bike tour in Europe, and the text says, "We're riding past Mont Saint-Michel today."
Oh, wow. That is, yeah, it creates this profound, almost spooky sensation that the universe is just, like, tapping you on the shoulder.
Right. Or like there's this other story of a guy in Queens who was just telling a friend how he never, ever sees Jeeps in their neighborhood.
I think I know where this is going.
Yeah, literally the next day he starts seeing Jeeps at every single intersection. It feels like you've unlocked some new level of reality or, someone is actively sending you a sign.
It definitely feels that
Yeah,
way.
or-
But the reality, and I guess this is the core thesis we're unpacking in today's deep dive, is, well, it's a bit less magical, though honestly, mechanically, it's far more fascinating.
Yeah, totally.
The universe isn't rearranging itself around you.
Hmm.
The frequency of these things hasn't changed at all. What has actually changed is your attention.
Right, your attention.
Exactly. We have to look at the cognitive science behind that shift in attention. But before we even get into the mechanics of the brain, the history of what we actually call this phenomenon is like a bizarre story in itself.
It really is. It's entirely accidental and honestly surprisingly dark for such a universal human experience.
Yeah, so most people probably know it as the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon.
Right.
And you'd assume, naturally, that Bader and Meinhof were like the cognitive psychologists who discovered it.
Sounds like a psychology duo.
Right. But it actually comes from a guy named Terry Mullen in Minnesota. So in 1994, Mullen wrote a letter to the St. Paul Pioneer Press.
Okay.
And he mentioned that he had just read an article about the Baader-Meinhof group, which was a notorious 1970s West German militant organization, the Red Army faction.
Yeah.
And after reading about this specific militant group just once, he suddenly started seeing references to them everywhere he looked.
And he just, wrote to his local paper about his random coincidence.
Basically, yeah. And other readers wrote back saying, oh my gosh, they experienced the exact same illusion with other words and objects.
That's amazing.
Then, in 1995, someone on an online message board was discussing this weird effect, remembered the newspaper story, and just casually dubbed it the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon.
And the name just stuck.
The name stuck simply because it was catchy.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. Because it's wild that we named a universal function of the human brain after a militant group just because one guy in Minnesota read an article.
I know, it's so weird.
I mean, isn't that like naming gravity the apple falling effect just because of Newton's tree? Why didn't a scientific term catch on sooner? And like, why do we have 3 different names for the exact same thing?
Well, a formal term didn't actually arrive until 2005. That's when a Stanford linguist named Arnold Zwicky coined the official academic name, which is the frequency illusion.
The frequency illusion. Okay.
Yeah, and he noticed it while studying language trends. People were constantly complaining to him about how often young California women use the word all as a quote, as in, and she's all, no way.
Oh, right, like a slang epidemic.
Exactly. People perceived it as this massive, unavoidable epidemic of slang. But when linguists actually measured the data, the frequency was surprisingly low.
Interesting.
Zwicky realized that once you flag a phenomenon in your mind, you falsely conclude it happens constantly.
Which makes sense. And if you spend any time on TikTok or in self-improvement circles today, you won't hear about Baader-Meinhof or Arnold Zwicky at all.
I know, definitely not.
You'll hear it called the red car theory, which is, the exact same psychology, just rebranded for social media algorithms.
Totally.
So understanding that this is an illusion, that the world isn't suddenly spawning more red cars or obscure German historical references, leads us directly to the question of how our brains are manufacturing this.
Right. And it essentially boils down to a two-step cognitive process.
Okay, lay it on me.
So step one is selective attention.
Yeah.
And to put the scale of this into perspective, you have to understand that our senses are bombarded with a staggering amount of data.
Like how much data?
Estimates suggest we receive up to 11 million bits of information per second from our environment.
11 million per second.
Per second. The hum of the refrigerator, the feeling of your socks on your feet, every single leaf on a tree in your peripheral vision. But our conscious awareness can only handle about 40 bits per second.
Wow.
Yeah, and some newer research even suggests it might be as low as 10 bits per second for, like, deliberate, conscious behavior.
That is a massive bottleneck, taking 11 million pieces of raw data and crushing it down to 40.
It is. The brain has to brutally filter out the noise. If it didn't,
Right.
we would just be completely paralyzed by sensory overload.
Right. We wouldn't be able to function.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it selects what is currently relevant to your immediate goals or your safety,
Right.
and it completely discards the rest. Which brings us to step two, which is confirmation bias. Once your brain's selective attention flags a new item, like a blue Honda Civic or a new vocabulary word, it starts keeping score.
It logs every hit.
Yes, it logs every single time you see that blue car as undeniable proof that the thing is everywhere. But here is the critical flaw. It entirely ignores the thousands of misses.
Ah, so it doesn't register the silver sedans or the red trucks or the black SUVs you passed.
Nope, you only count the hits, and that selective math creates a really powerful illusion of massive frequency.
So my brain is basically a ruthless bouncer at a club. 11 million pieces of data are trying to get in, but the bouncer only lets 40 through the door.
That's a great way to look at it.
But, I read articles constantly claiming this bouncer is the reticular activating system in the brainstem. People throw that term around in those red car theory videos all the time to sound scientific. Is that true, or is the internet oversimplifying it?
Oh, it is a massive oversimplification, and it's a really popular misconception we definitely need to correct.
Okay, good to know.
The reticular activating system, or RAS, is a real part of the brainstem, but it primarily regulates basic wakefulness and arousal, like it sets your general alertness level.
So it's not recognizing cars.
No, it does not process semantic meaning. Your brainstem doesn't know what a Honda Civic is, and it doesn't recognize that new vocabulary word you just learned. It just cannot perform complex, meaning-based filtering.
So who is the actual bouncer making the decisions at the door then?
The real mechanism relies on priming combined with higher-level cortical networks.
Orbital networks.
Got it. Yeah. So when you learn a new concept, your brain primes it. It places it in a temporarily heightened state of readiness. Then, two specific networks take over.
Okay, what are they?
First, your frontoparietal attention network acts like a spotlight, constantly scanning the environment for anything related to your current goals.
Like a searchlight.
Exactly.
Okay.
Meanwhile, your salience network acts like an internal alarm bell. When the spotlight hits something that matches the primed concept, the alarm bell rings, and that specific piece of data is handed over to your conscious awareness.
That makes so much more sense. But if the brain is managing this massive filter, it raises a huge question about how it actually decides what makes the cut.
Right.
Because psychologists used to think this filter was a rigid wall, didn't they? Like Donald Broadbent, he had this filter model where he suggested we block unattended information incredibly early in the process, based purely on physical traits.
Yes, that was the old theory.
Like your brain filters out a voice because of its pitch or volume before you even comprehend what the voice is actually saying.
And, Broadbent's model made logical sense for a long time. It's very efficient. But it had a fatal flaw when applied to real life.
The cocktail party effect, right?
Exactly. It couldn't explain the cocktail party effect.
Yeah.
So imagine you were at a crowded, noisy room, you're deep in conversation, and your brain is successfully tuning out all the loud chatter around you. According to Broadbent, your brain has basically shut the door on all that background noise. But then, from 20 feet away, someone quietly mentions your name.
And you instantly hear it, even though it wasn't loud.
Exactly. If the door was completely shut based on physical volume, how did the semantic meaning of your name get through?
It wouldn't have. And that's where Anne Treisman's attenuation theory changes the game, right?
Got it.
She realized the filter isn't a solid door, it's a volume knob. So we turn down the volume of irrelevant stimuli, but we still process their meaning on a subconscious level.
Right.
We're essentially wearing earplugs. We block out the noise, But we can still hear a shout if it's highly relevant to us.
Yes, and this volume knob is so powerful that it causes inattentional blindness.
Oh, I love this experiment.
The Invisible Gorilla Experiment by Christopher Simons and Daniel Shabris. It's a classic. So they asked people to watch a video of students passing a basketball and tasked them with counting the exact number of passes.
Which is hard, you really have to focus.
Right, so while the viewers are intensely focused on the math, a person in a full gorilla suit walks right into the middle of the game, thumps their chest, and just walks off.
And people miss it.
Half of the people watching completely miss the gorilla. Their frontoparietal spotlight is so narrowly focused on the basketball that the salience network never rings the alarm for a giant gorilla.
That is wild. But okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. So if I'm looking for a dog in a park, I turn up the volume for dogs.
Yeah.
But what about the split category effect? Like if I'm looking for 3 specific breeds, say beagles, poodles, and bulldogs, instead of just dogs, how does breaking it down affect the volume knob? Does it actually make my brain think there are more dogs than there really are?
It absolutely does. The split category effect acts like a massive amplifier for the frequency illusion.
How so?
Well, when you search for the broad category of dogs, your brain monitors one single channel.
Mm.
But when you split it into specific subcategories, beagles, poodles, bulldogs, you give your attention network multiple distinct search targets.
Oh, I see.
Because you are actively running 3 separate spotlights, your brain logs significantly more individual hits. This tricks your cognitive processing into overestimating the total frequency.
Wow.
You turned up the volume on 3 different channels simultaneously, making the overall presence of dogs seem much louder than it actually is.
Okay, so if this is all just a mechanical volume knob in the cortex and we're just selectively overcounting, why does the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon feel so profoundly spiritual?
That is a great question.
Because when it happens, it doesn't feel like a frontoparietal network functioning. It feels like magic.
It feels magical because humans are inherently meaning-making creatures. We suffer from a cognitive bias called apophenia, which is basically this irresistible tendency to find meaningful patterns in completely random noise.
Right. And Carl Jung had a term for this, didn't he?
Yeah, the psychoanalyst Carl Jung coined the term synchronicity for this. He believed these meaningful coincidences actually held deep psychological significance.
And narrative psychologists point out that we don't just experience life as a random sequence of events, right? We are constantly writing a story in our heads to give our lives coherence.
Exactly. We need this story to make sense.
And there's this meaning-making theory by Crystal Park that shows during times of stress, uncertainty, or major life changes, like, say, going through a bad breakup or losing a job, we actively search for signs to restore order.
Which is so human. When you are feeling lost and you suddenly experience a string of coincidences, you instinctively weave them into your personal narrative. You interpret it as a sign that you are on the right path. It provides comfort. And this is the exact emotional hook that the red car theory on the internet taps into, the idea that noticing things somehow magically brings you new opportunities.
But changing your attention doesn't magically summon more red cars into existence.
No, definitely not.
Like when I learn a really rare word like ithyphallic, which, for anyone who hasn't stumbled into ancient art history, literally means having an erect phallus.
Oh, wow.
Right. And then I see it in a completely unrelated novel the very next day. It feels like the universe is winking at me. So is there a real danger in trusting these signs from the universe too much? Could it lead us into, like, conspiracy theory territory?
There is a very real danger, actually. It leads into what researchers call the mongoose phenomenon, which explores the tension between genuine discovery and cognitive bias.
Okay, wait. What does a mongoose have to do with cognitive bias?
It's a funny name, but it comes from this classic philosophical anecdote about a man carrying a box.
Huh?
So a friend asks what's inside the box, and the man says, "A mongoose, to kill the imaginary snakes my brother sees when he drinks too much."
Wait, but the snakes are imaginary.
Exactly. The friend says, "But the snakes are imaginary." And the man just replies, "Well, this is an imaginary mongoose."
Oh my gosh, that is brilliant.
It perfectly captures the danger of engaging with the delusion on its own terms. When you rely solely on coincidences and interpret them as external signs, you bypass critical thinking entirely.
You start applying imaginary solutions to imaginary patterns.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a very fine line between open-mindedness, being receptive to new information, and delusion, where you just force random data to fit a preconceived narrative. The frequency illusion doesn't tell you what the world is doing. It reveals what you currently care about.
It's a mirror, not a crystal ball.
That's a perfect way to put it, yes.
That distinction is huge. And the danger of this cognitive bias goes way beyond personal superstitions or feeling like you're on the right life path, doesn't it? When you scale this up, it actually sways global economies and medical diagnoses.
It really does. Let's look at economics for a second. There was a fascinating study that analyzed perceptions of inflation in Sweden.
What do they find?
Researchers found a massive discrepancy. Swedish women perceived a significantly higher overall rate of national inflation than Swedish men did.
Wait, why would gender affect how you perceive national inflation?
Because of daily exposure. At the time, the prices of food and daily groceries were inflating much faster than big-ticket items.
Oh, I see.
And women were doing the majority of the household food shopping. Because they were buying milk and bread every single day, their brains were constantly logging hits for price increases.
So their daily exposure to those specific hikes primed their brains, heavily biasing their perception of the total economic reality.
Exactly. They bypassed the official consumer price index because their personal salience network was just ringing the alarm every time they went to the supermarket.
That is incredible. Their personal attention filter actually distorted a macroeconomic metric for them.
Yes.
And we saw this happen in medicine recently, too. During the early days of the pandemic, doctors started seeing patients with discolored, swollen toes.
Oh, COVID toes. I remember that.
Yeah, COVID toes.
Ugh.
Because the entire medical community was heavily primed to look for COVID-19 everywhere, they experienced the frequency illusion. They assumed COVID toes had a massive incidence rate. But when they actually stepped back and ran the data later, the actual incidence of COVID in those specific patients was surprisingly low. It was the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon playing tricks on highly trained professionals.
But, the flip side is that this bias isn't always harmful. In medicine, that exact same illusion can save lives.
Really? How so?
Take a rare gastrointestinal issue called a Dieulafoy's lesion.
Okay.
It is an abnormally large artery hidden in the stomach lining that can cause severe bleeding, but it is microscopic and incredibly hard to spot during an endoscopy.
That sounds dangerous.
It is.
Yeah.
However, once a doctor learns about it or manages to spot it just once, their brain gets primed. The threshold for detecting it drops dramatically.
So they suddenly become highly successful at spotting it in future endoscopies.
Exactly. The actual frequency of the lesion in the population hasn't changed at all, but their life-saving detection rate skyrockets because their spotlight is now specifically looking for it.
So this frequency illusion can distort national inflation rates or make a doctor misdiagnose you with COVID toes, but it can also rewire your brain to spot a hidden life-saving detail.
Yeah, it's powerful.
Which makes me wonder if this bias makes our brains hyper-focus on whatever we just learned. Can we intentionally hack it for our own benefit?
You can absolutely hack it. There's this idea called the natural frequency hypothesis, which suggests that human cognition evolved specifically to process frequencies and count events rather than to understand abstract probabilities.
Yeah.
Because our brains are completely hardwired to count hits, we can weaponize the Baader-Meinhof effect to accelerate our own learning.
Because it's not a bug in our software, it's actually our memory system working perfectly, right?
Precisely.
When you learn something new, your brain sensibly marks it as relevant and lowers the threshold for detecting it.
And every subsequent time you encounter that concept in the real world, it acts as a spontaneous retrieval event. Memory science tells us that recalling information in a fresh context is one of the most powerful ways to strengthen a neural pathway.
So you don't have to force yourself to study with flashcards. The world just does the testing for you.
That's it, exactly.
The actionable advice here is to use this intentionally, especially in professional or personal growth. Let's say you're going to a networking event.
Right.
If you deliberately learn just one new concept a day, maybe an emerging trend in your industry, you are actively priming your brain. You step into that room, and instead of being overwhelmed by the noise, your brain starts naturally looking for that trend in conversations.
You are actively managing your salience network. You are telling your brain's bouncer exactly who to look for.
I love that. I'm basically handing the bouncer a VIP photo of that specific industry trend and saying, hey, if you hear anyone mention this, let it through the door immediately.
Yes.
And if you stack related concepts like learning about a different aspect of your field every day for a week, you stop seeing isolated facts and start seeing the whole network connected together. You basically turn the whole world into a giant interactive learning tool.
Think about the broader implications of that. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon essentially proves that we are, at our core, pattern-seeking machines.
We really are.
Our brains are expertly designed to filter out the deafening noise of an overwhelming world to show us what currently matters to us. It creates the illusion of frequency through a combination of selective attention, which is the spotlight, choosing the signal, and confirmation bias, which is the tally counter logging the hits.
It's just incredible to realize how much of our everyday reality is just a curated feed, heavily edited by our own cortex.
It really is a curated feed.
So we want you to take a moment and examine your own recent experiences. What is your attention currently tuned to? Are you seeing a certain type of car everywhere, a specific new slang word, maybe an architectural detail on houses?
What does that tell you about your current goals or, maybe even your current anxieties?
It's a really fascinating exercise in self-awareness. Look at what you are noticing, and you'll see what your subconscious is currently prioritizing. So we have a question for you. What's something you suddenly started seeing everywhere after learning about it? Take a second to really think about it, because
Well, because now that you've learned exactly what the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon is and how your frontal network actually operates, you are statistically guaranteed to hear someone mention it or read about it within the next 48 hours.
the threshold has been lowered.
Your confirmation bias is officially warming up. And when you do see it, you have to ask yourself, is the universe sending you a sign? Or did we just hijack your brain's selective filter?